Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a journey so stomach-churningly strange, you'll probably clutch your pillow a little tighter. You're in a wooden bed, somewhere between a monastery and a torture chamber. Candles flicker against stone walls. Outside, a horse neighs. Inside, someone is applying a bowl of leeches to your ankle. Before you settle in, take a second to like and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy the content I'm sharing with you. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Go ahead and lower the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's slowly drift into tonight's journey together. You don't move. You can't. The room smells like musty linens and stale blood. The doctor, if you can call him that, wears robes stained from who knows what and mutters something about your humors being out of balance. He lifts a small wooden box and opens it with a flourish. Inside, dozens of tiny, wriggling creatures squirm in the dark. Leeches. You swallow hard. They're going on your body. Bloodletting is the medical world's favorite houseguest for almost 2,000 years. You've got a headache? You bleed. Fever? Bleed more. Coughing? Let's crack a vein and see what comes out. The logic. Ancient Greek medicine revolved around four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you're feeling off, one of these must be overdoing it. Solution: drain the excess. And so, the leeches descend. Cold, slimy suction cups wiggle against your skin before they latch on. The sting is sharp but short-lived. What follows is a strange, pulsing rhythm, like your own body rhythmically giving up. Leeches weren't just for the sick. Royals and nobles used them proactively. That's right, preventive bleeding was a thing. You imagine Queen Elizabeth I, cloaked in velvet, quietly bleeding out twice a month between courtly duties and poetry readings. If you're not the leech type, you get the lancet. A thin, curved blade slices into a vein, and the blood pours freely into a basin. Your doctor might even weigh it, nodding with satisfaction as if watching you drain is an art form. This wasn't just backyard quackery. Major hospitals and learned physicians from Cairo to Paris practiced bloodletting like it was gospel. Historians still argue whether bloodletting ever actually helped anything. It might have reduced high blood pressure, accidentally. Or maybe it just made patients feel faint enough to confuse the feeling with improvement. But the worst part: the insects worked overtime. Leeches could drink 5 times their weight in blood. Then, when they got lazy, you had to sprinkle salt on them so they'd detach, resulting in a thank you vomit of your own blood. Lovely. Now imagine you're recovering. Bandages loosely wrapped, your skin raw. Your physician lights a candle and prepares for phase 2, the cupping. Glass cups heated over flame are pressed onto your back. They create little domes of vacuum, sucking the skin into swollen red mounds. More blood comes up. Of course it does. Cupping has made a modern comeback, believe it or not. Olympians and celebrities parade their bruise-dotted backs on Instagram, claiming toxins are being removed. The 14th century barber surgeon would be so proud. He'd also be thrilled to know that in rural 1800s France, folks believed not bleeding led to insanity. Yes, if you kept all your blood to yourself, madness surely awaited. A quirky footnote here: there was once a fad called wet cupping with scarification. You'd be sliced open first, then cupped. It was considered more effective because it got that blood flowing faster, kind of like speedrunning a horror movie. You sit there, a little woozy, maybe a bit chilly from the blood loss, wondering if you're cured yet. But your physician has a glint in his eye and says, "Just one more thing." He brings out more leeches, for your eyes this time. Yes, your eyes. Eye leeching was thought to fix everything from conjunctivitis to cataracts. The logic: your eye is inflamed, so clearly the blood near it is bad. Pop a leech under the eyelid, and voila, ancient LASIK, if LASIK involved night terrors. Some of the more eccentric practitioners insisted on using only Hungarian leeches, claiming they were more vigorous. A sort of luxury leech. You wonder if they came with tiny monocles and top hats. As you sit there, weak and ghostly pale, you catch your reflection in a copper bowl. You're a few pounds lighter, mostly blood. But hey, maybe that's progress? The leeches slither contentedly in their bowl, bloated like tiny vampires that just raided a buffet. And still, the theory persists. Sickness is bad stuff, and if you take out the stuff, you cure the sickness. Logical. In the same way draining your car's oil because it's overheating sounds like a good idea. But you know what's really chilling? This wasn't fringe. This wasn't a last resort. This was medicine's main dish for nearly 2 millennia. Roman legions bled. Arab scholars bled. American founding fathers bled. Even George Washington's final moments were spent with multiple pints of blood drained from his body. Some say it was the bloodletting that killed him. And yet, in a dark, candlelit room, covered in leech welts and cup bruises, you lay back and whisper, "I think I feel better?" You poor, brave soul. You're not out of the infirmary yet. Your color's returned, sort of, but now you're lying on a bed made of goat wool, while a cloaked woman waves a burning root under your nose. The smell? Like scorched garlic and despair. She mutters something about your womb being unanchored, and you blink, confused. Welcome to the world of hysteria cures, where the female body is considered a roaming, rebellious entity, and the solution is almost never warm tea and a nap. You see, according to ancient Greek physicians, particularly Hippocrates and his entourage of guesswork specialists, the uterus was not a stationary organ. No, it had ambitions. It could climb, twist, suffocate. Feeling faint? The womb's in your chest. Breathless? It's strangling your throat. It was called the wandering womb, and it was blamed for everything from insomnia to sudden paralysis. Historians still argue whether the idea stemmed from genuine observation or deeply rooted fear of female autonomy. Probably a generous helping of both. And so, you lie there as a mix of foul smells are pushed toward your nostrils. Burnt hair, sulfur, dried herbs. The idea is to repel the womb back into place. But the real kicker? Pleasant fragrances are wafted near your other end. Apparently, the uterus can be lured home like a cat with tuna. It's medicinal aromatherapy, ancient edition. Meanwhile, you're clutching a dried hedgehog bladder filled with warm sand, because someone read it helps with feminine discontent. You sigh. You haven't even gotten to the massaging. Enter the midwife-turned-therapist. With oiled hands and an unreadable smile, she begins a pelvic massage intended to release hysterial vapor. You're expected to reach a paroxysm of relief. Modern scholars would call this something else entirely, but in medieval texts, it was just another Tuesday in gynecology. A quirky detail? This hands-on method became so common in 19th century Europe that doctors actually complained of wrist strain. That's right, the first electrical vibrators weren't sold for fun. They were medical devices, designed to give physicians a break. The Sears catalog sold one in 1902 as a relaxation aid. You picture a Victorian housewife reclining with tea in one hand and her prescription in the other. You shift on the itchy mattress as two assistants bring in a wooden contraption resembling a spinning wheel crossed with a butter churn. You're told it's an early uterine repositioner. Basically, a glorified plunger for your insides. To treat hysteria, practitioners also recommended marriage. Or pregnancy. Or both. Because nothing cures emotional distress quite like 7 children and a husband named Reginald who smells like pipe ash. Still feeling emotional. The doctor prescribes a diet of cold fish and barley. No red wine. No figs. And absolutely no loud music. Apparently, flutes were known to overexcite the womb. Poor flutes. Just trying to entertain, suddenly the villain of the uterus. And here's a chilling mainstream fact. The term hysterectomy literally derives from hysteria. That's right, your entire uterus was often removed, not for tumors or fibroids, but for what was deemed unmanageable behavior. 19th century asylum records are peppered with women institutionalized and sterilized for melancholia, bookishness, or, brace yourself, talking too much. One fringe case in rural Hungary involved women being wrapped in cold, wet linens and locked in dark cellars for hours to cool the womb. You try not to imagine how many patients came out icier but no calmer. A faint knock sounds at the door. The physician enters with a jar of something brown and pulpy. Dates, honey, and ashes of burnt deer horn. It's to be inserted somewhere. You don't ask where. You already regret asking anything. And still, there's a note of earnest care here. The people trying these things genuinely believed they were helping. Your healer consults a thick leather-bound book with ink sketches of uterus-shaped balloons floating near lungs and collarbones. Every page seems to say, "We don't know, but we're trying." You sit up, dizzy but curious. In some parts of ancient Egypt, midwives applied crocodile dung mixed with honey to recenter the womb. This was also used as contraception. You wonder who was brave enough to test that theory. And who, exactly, collected the crocodile dung. It's not all horror and dung though. Some treatments included warm baths scented with lavender and almond milk. Others involved storytelling and music, gentle harp melodies played by candlelight while the patient soaked. Not the worst kind of womb therapy, honestly. But then, the treatment shifts again. You're brought a small iron cage meant to be worn beneath your skirts. It's a modesty aid, designed to discourage wandering urges, physical or mental. You look down at this antique chastity belt and raise an eyebrow. No thank you. Another practitioner offers a chalky pill labeled female calmative. Inside, dried opium, ground pearls, and powdered lily bulb. Supposed to help with nervous outbursts. You take a cautious whiff. It smells like bad decisions and overly confident alchemy. In modern times, we might scoff. We've got hormone therapy, counseling, yoga retreats. But the core idea hasn't changed all that much. Someone thinks you're too emotional, and they're looking for a way to fix you. The packaging just got fancier. You exhale, the room finally quiet. No more burning roots. No more massaging devices with ominous cranks. Just you, the goat-wool bed, and the strange comfort of knowing your uterus isn't going on any surprise vacations tonight. You wake to a clatter outside the infirmary, wooden wheels, heavy chains, a goat bleating in protest. You shuffle to the window, half expecting another round of leeches or lavender-scented regret. But no. Today's medicine comes with bells, and maybe a fire hazard. Your stomach tightens. It's time for trepanation. Yes, that delightful ancient hobby of drilling a hole into someone's skull and calling it a cure. You feel the back of your head instinctively. Still intact. For now. Picture this. You're a warrior in pre-Inca Peru. You've just come back from battle, dazed and with a splitting headache. Your village healer places a warm hand on your forehead and says something that loosely translates to, "Let's take the top off and see what's inside." And that's not a joke. Archaeologists have found thousands of trepanned skulls from ancient Peru, some with up to 7 different holes. Not only did people survive the procedure, many of them lived long enough to have bone regrowth, meaning their heads were basically medical Swiss cheese. Historians still argue whether trepanation was done more for ritual purposes or genuine medical need. Maybe it was both. The logic: let the evil spirits out. If you're hallucinating, depressed, or just plain annoying the village, chances are you've got a demon lodged somewhere near your frontal lobe. The procedure itself? You're laid flat, sometimes tied down. No anesthesia, unless you count local herbs or divine encouragement. A sharp, circular instrument, often made of flint, bronze, or obsidian, is placed gently on your skull and twisted back and forth. Sometimes it's more of a scraping motion, shaving layer after layer until daylight peeks through. At this point, your head is literally open to the elements. A quirky tidbit: some medieval doctors believed the soul entered and exited the body through the head. So trepanation. Just making sure the soul had better airflow. Like spiritual home renovation. You're led into a cold, stone room. A fire crackles in the corner. The surgeon, who moonlights as a blacksmith, has heated his tools until they glow orange-red. This is cauterization. After drilling, it's time to burn the wound closed, because bleeding out would ruin the whole experiment. You'd think this would be the worst part, but your body, already in shock, treats pain like background noise. You stare at the ceiling, wondering if you'll be wiser when this is done. Surprisingly, some trepanned patients did claim relief, especially from severe headaches, seizures, or pressure from skull fractures. In the Renaissance, one barber surgeon even claimed he could cure madness with a hole and a prayer. Whether it worked or just silenced the patient, we'll never really know. Now imagine a monk in 11th century France sketching your head in a notebook, marveling at the symmetry of your wound. He labels it trepanned, cooperative, and returns to tending the fire. In one fringe case, a traveling quack in Bavaria claimed he could remove stones of madness through trepanation. He'd pull a sleight of hand, make an incision, then sneak a pebble out of his sleeve and hold it up like he'd just exorcised your anxiety. Behold, the cursed stone. The crowds cheered. You, dizzy and bleeding, weren't so sure. You lie back now, pressure bandages tight around your head, the sound of dripping water echoing through the room. You're lucky. Many patients died from infection. Germ theory was still centuries away. But if you lived, you became something of a local miracle. The one who faced the drill and came back sharper, or at least quieter. Fast forward to 19th century Britain. Trepanation gets a second wind. Doctors start recommending it for epilepsy, migraines, even moral insanity. You picture a stiff Victorian gentleman with a monocle and a trepanned skull, sipping brandy and insisting he feels quite cleared up, thank you. By the 20th century, things got even weirder. A Dutch librarian named Bart Hughes trepanned himself with a dental drill, convinced that it would restore the natural rhythm of brain blood volume. He documented the process: mirror, drill, towels, blood, like a DIY project from hell. Fringe followers popped up around him, preaching the mental clarity of the permanently high oxygenated brain. The vibe was equal parts cult and science fair. You touch your own temple. Still no holes. Yet there's something haunting about the calm resolve of those who chose this path. Were they desperate, enlightened, or just unlucky enough to visit a healer with a drill and a theory? A scholarly debate still bubbles around whether trepanation could actually relieve pressure from brain injuries. Some modern neurosurgeons quietly admit that, in very rare circumstances, ancient practitioners might have accidentally stumbled on rudimentary cranial decompression. A broken clock is right twice a day, after all. The flames die low. You hear the sound of metal tools clinking together, being cleaned. Maybe reused. Probably reused. Someone offers you a cup of water with a sprig of rosemary, thought to protect the brain. You sip, then close your eyes. You survived. Your head is lighter, both figuratively and literally. And as the surgeon ties a charm around your wrist, murmuring blessings in a long-dead language, you realize something. You've just had ancient neurosurgery without a license, anesthesia, or a clear plan. And somehow, you're still alive. Your vision's still swimming from the trepanation, but there's no rest yet. You're ushered, slowly, like a soggy loaf, into another chamber. It smells like vinegar, mold, and a touch of overconfidence. The walls are lined with wooden benches, and there, right in the center, is tonight's special. A steaming vat of something that looks like punishment. Welcome to pus therapy, where ancient logic decided that if your wound isn't infected, it's just not healing right. You ease down beside a woman with a bandaged leg and a serene expression, as if she's just accepted the inevitable. A monk with an apron approaches you holding a ladle. Inside, a thick, off-white sludge. He calls it laudable pus, and hands it over like a blessing. Let's talk about this oozy milestone in medical misunderstanding. For centuries, across Europe and the Islamic world, pus was considered a positive sign. Surgeons were trained to encourage it. It was like the gold star sticker of wound care. If your incision bubbled and oozed, congratulations, you were on the mend. Mainstream fact. Galen, the rock star physician of the Roman Empire, swore by it. He believed suppuration, the fancy word for pus, meant your body was actively pushing out toxins. His influence lingered like bad advice for over 1,000 years. So now here you are, seated next to a vat of medically approved goo, as a nurse applies a poultice made of bread, goat's milk, and cobwebs to your recently trepanned scalp. You want to protest, but she gives you a look that says, "I once saw a man recover from plague with this." You sigh. "Bread it is." Historians still argue whether this reverence for pus was entirely Galen's doing, or if later surgeons leaned into it simply because they had no better benchmarks for recovery. After all, no thermometers, no antibiotics, just vibes and yellow fluid. A quirky detail? Medieval barbers, yes, the guys who cut hair, were also licensed to perform surgery. They'd bleed you one day and trim your beard the next. Some even offered package deals: trepanation, pus application, and a shave. You imagine a wooden sign, "Pus while you wait." You peer down at your leg. It's been wrapped in old linen soaked in animal fat. The smell is complicated. Supposedly, it keeps the wound moist and invites natural fermentation. You think it invites flies. Another patient coughs nearby. The monk inspects the sputum. "Excellent," he mutters, nodding. "Good. Thick progress." You're not sure whether to feel relieved or deeply concerned. Let's step briefly into the world of battlefield medicine. Picture the Crimean War. Florence Nightingale and her team walk into makeshift hospitals where wounded soldiers lie in pools of their own filth. The prevailing wisdom? If their wounds aren't festering, they're not healing. Nightingale disagreed, obviously, but at the time, she was in the minority. And don't forget the maggots. Yes, in certain cases, wounds were left intentionally uncovered, allowing fly larvae to move in. The maggots would eat the dead tissue, leaving healthy flesh behind. Sounds horrific, right? But get this, modern medicine has re-embraced this technique, in a cleaner, lab-grown way, of course. Still, in this damp medieval room, it's much less biotherapy, and much more, we gave up and let nature handle it. One fringe case from 15th century Italy describes a nobleman who bathed twice daily in calf's blood to draw out the inner rotting. His personal physician documented the smell as resembling pickled cheese left under a saddle. You adjust your bandages. You'd rather smell like cheese than be dead, probably. You're handed a small cup of fermented mare's milk, supposed to boost the immune system. It tastes like betrayal. Someone pats your back. You'll scab beautifully, they say. In Renaissance France, barber surgeons began crafting custom ointments to encourage laudable pus. One popular recipe included vinegar, lead oxide, frankincense, and crushed emeralds. Yes, emeralds. Because nothing says wound healing like rubbing powdered luxury directly into your infected skin. There's even a documented trend where wounds that failed to produce pus were reopened deliberately, just to try again. A fresh start, if you will. You shudder at the thought. As time lurches forward, whispers of germ theory begin to swirl. Scientists like Semmelweis and Lister pushing the radical idea that clean might be better. But for now, your caretakers remain lovingly devoted to ooze. They place your pus-covered bandage in a jar for safekeeping. Might be useful for the next patient, someone says cheerily. You lean back against the wall, skin warm, pulse slow. You're caught somewhere between infection and enlightenment. You now know more than you ever wanted to about what qualifies as a laudable bodily fluid. And as the room dims and the fire crackles low, you hear the quiet muttering of a new arrival. Another poor soul has been brought in from the road, head bandaged, arm limp. They'll get the goat milk sponge. Maybe even some cobwebs. You close your eyes. You've made it through another treatment. Laudably, even. You're just beginning to drift into something resembling rest when someone taps your shoulder with all the subtlety of a goat kicking a bucket. You crack one eye open. A man in dark robes stands above you, holding. Is that a frog? It is. Welcome to the golden age of animal remedies, where your aches, fevers, and spiritual turmoil might all be blamed on not enough lizard extract, or too much toad. You're told this particular frog has been blessed with absorptive powers. The healer places it on your chest and instructs you not to flinch. It will draw the illness out, he whispers. You nod slowly, wondering if this is a metaphor or if the frog actually signed up for this. A mainstream historical gem? In ancient Egypt, doctors routinely used animal parts in medicine, from crocodile dung used as contraceptive paste, to crushed scarabs added to drinks to treat heart disease. It wasn't a joke to them. These weren't just animals, they were vessels of cosmic power. You, however, are starting to suspect your frog is just cold. Across medieval Europe, things only got weirder. One common cure for a sore throat? Tie a live toad in a pouch and wear it around your neck until it dies. Only then would the illness transfer out. If the toad survived, well, you were obviously still sick. Historians still argue whether these animal-based remedies were primarily spiritual, symbolic, or just desperate trial and error. Some evidence suggests physicians truly believed animals absorbed sickness like sponges. Others think people simply wanted to do something, anything, in a world with so little control. You sit there, the frog gently wheezing on your chest, while a nurse massages your feet with goose fat. Apparently, this promotes circulation and chases off melancholia. Somewhere in the background, someone is boiling crushed beetles into a thick, black syrup. You don't ask what it's for. A quirky favorite from ancient Greece, salamander oil, said to cure baldness. Pliny the Elder swore by it, claiming the salamander was so cold it could extinguish fire. So clearly, rubbing its essence on your head would cool your scalp and let hair flourish. You imagine a toga-clad man rubbing amphibian gel into his hairline and whispering, "Come back to me." You're handed a warm cloth. It smells musky. Turns out it's been soaked in ferret urine and goat's milk. This combo is meant to ward off night sweats. You wonder aloud if it can also ward off loneliness, dignity, and fleas. There's a man in the corner clutching a pigeon. He looks relieved. Turns out pigeons were sometimes slit open and applied to the soles of the feet to draw out the fever. Warm, fleshy foot pigeon, because who needs socks when you have wings? You glance at the frog again. It hasn't moved in 10 minutes. Is that a good sign? The healer comes by and swaps the frog for a dried viper skin. It's tied to your arm, like a strange medieval bracelet. Meant to prevent epilepsy, apparently. You ask if epilepsy has something to do with snakes. The healer smiles. Not the way you're thinking. Comforting. In the Islamic Golden Age, animal remedies took a more measured, pharmacological turn. Physicians like Avicenna categorized ingredients by hot, cold, wet, and dry properties. Musk glands from deer were used for strengthening the heart. Bezoar stones from goat stomachs were prized as universal antidotes. You'd sell half a city block for one. Still, no one could quite explain why some patients got better and others didn't. One fringe tale tells of a 13th century nun who treated leg ulcers by placing mice in a jar, letting them ferment with herbs, then applying the mixture directly to the wound. She swore by it. Her patients. Less enthusiastic. Back in your room, someone is now applying honey and spider silk to your trepanned scalp. That part, oddly enough, doesn't feel so bad. Spider silk has antiseptic properties. The honey, too. But just when you start to think maybe this is progress, they add a dollop of ox gall, because, they say, it binds the good intentions. You feel like a medieval smoothie. Suddenly, someone bursts in shouting about a man who swallowed a coin and is now cursed. The remedy? Feed him a live eel wrapped in lettuce. You don't ask whether he's supposed to chew. Your healer checks the frog. It's moved slightly, he says proudly. You're clearly improving. You decide not to point out that it moved because he picked it up. A fresh cloth is draped over your eyes, this time soaked in bat blood and rosewater. For dreams, the nurse says, tapping your forehead with 2 fingers. You can't tell if this is medical treatment or low-budget sorcery, but you're too tired to care. Even in modern times, animal parts haven't fully left the pharmacopoeia. Certain hormones, enzymes, and antivenoms are still harvested from snakes, pigs, and leeches. You begin to wonder, maybe frogs had it right all along. Maybe they're the unsung heroes, the silent saints of sickness. The healer returns one last time to apply a mixture of crushed earthworms and mint leaves to the soles of your feet. It's cooling. Kind of nice, actually. You make a mental note to ask for that again, without the context. You pull your blanket closer and listen to the faint croak of the frog as it's returned to its cage. You're not sure if you're cured, but you do feel unusual. Light-headed, tingly, strangely reassured. Maybe that's part of the magic. Or maybe it's the bat blood kicking in. Whatever the case, you're still breathing. The frog's still blinking. And somewhere in the night, another pigeon prepares to meet its feet-bound fate. You're lying there, head sticky with frog sweat and your feet minty fresh from earthworm balm, when a small cart creaks into the room. It's pushed by a hunched man with a 1,000-yard stare and suspiciously clean hands. On the cart, jars. Dozens of them. All filled with something dark, squirming, and deeply enthusiastic. Leeches. If you flinch, it's already too late. One of the attendants has rolled up your sleeve and murmured, "You're due for a cleanse." You are not, in fact, due for anything, but that doesn't matter. Tonight, you're entering the charming, drippy world of medicinal bloodletting. Let's start with the mainstream fact. Bloodletting wasn't just popular, it was medical law for centuries. From ancient Mesopotamia all the way to 19th century Europe, doctors believed that virtually every ailment, from fevers to headaches to an unfortunate case of melancholy, could be treated by draining a bit of the red stuff. The theory behind it. The body was thought to be governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness? Clearly an imbalance. Got a cough? Too much blood. Feeling sluggish? Still too much blood. Stubbed your toe? Guess what? You feel the first leech latch on. It's surprisingly gentle, like a wet kiss from a very confident raisin. You squirm anyway. Don't move, the healer says softly. It's finding your energy. You don't question what that means. Leeches weren't always the first choice. In early practices, bloodletting was done with lancets, tiny knives. Physicians would slice open a vein, often in the arm or neck, and let the blood flow into a brass bowl until the patient turned pale and philosophical. Sometimes it was measured. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was guesswork with great confidence. Historians still argue whether any of this actually helped. Some think it simply did something, a visible ritual that made patients feel like action was being taken. Others argue it was a placebo soaked in panic. What's undeniable is that many people bled, and a fair number of them felt better, until they didn't. You count 7 leeches now, each one fattening like a little medical croissant. The nurse hums as she checks their progress. They'll drop off when they're full, she says. You can't tell if that's comforting or distressing. In the 12th century, Islamic physicians like al-Zahrawi advanced bloodletting into something more structured. He described precise sites on the body, where to cut, how deep, how long to bleed. He also warned against letting barbers do it unsupervised, which, ironically, guaranteed that barbers immediately doubled down. And oh yes, our favorite medieval multitaskers, the barber surgeons. You could get your beard trimmed and a pint drained in one sitting. The iconic red and white pole you still see today? That's a reference to the blood-stained bandages that used to hang outside their shops. Festive. A quirky entry from Renaissance Venice involves leech competitions, where noble families would breed and train their own leeches to be faster, stronger, and more selective in their biting. This probably says more about Renaissance leisure time than it does about medicine. You're starting to feel light-headed. Someone offers you a warm broth of horseradish and quince, meant to refortify your vapors. You sip slowly, watching one particularly ambitious leech make its way up your shoulder like it has big dreams. In 18th century France, leech mania peaked. Hospitals ordered them in bulk, literally millions per year. Apothecaries kept them in jars like snacks. Physicians prescribed them for everything from toothaches to hysteria, which, let's be honest, mostly meant women being tired of 18th century nonsense. One fringe anecdote from a Bavarian monastery tells of a monk who believed the positioning of stars influenced the success of bloodletting. He refused to open a vein unless Mars was in a benevolent mood. His patients mostly suffered in silence, sometimes forever. A new assistant comes in to check your pulse. They look pleased. "You're doing great," they whisper. "Only one more jar." You ask, carefully, if that means more leeches. "No," they say brightly, "that's for your urine." You instantly regret asking. Back to the Romans for a moment. Galen, that ever-present juggernaut of ancient medicine, had an entire catalogue of where to bleed for what. Headache. Vein near the temple. Chest congestion. Try the elbow. Hemorrhoids. We don't talk about that one. You look down. The leeches are bloated now. Plump, glistening, and honestly a little proud of themselves. One drops off with a gentle plop. The nurse picks it up, places it into a recovery dish, and whispers, "Good job, Persephone." You suddenly realize these leeches have names. You ask if anyone's ever bled too much. Everyone in the room goes quiet. Spoiler, they have. George Washington, for example. Yes, that George was bled nearly to death by his own physicians in 1799. Sore throat turned feverish? He requested bloodletting. Over 10 pints later, he was cured of everything. The last leech releases and slinks off like a cat done with your nonsense. You're bandaged up with linen soaked in vinegar and thyme. To balance the aura, someone says, because of course it is. You lie back, feeling lighter, floatier, somehow both emptier and fuller. Maybe your humors are aligned. Maybe you're just severely anemic. As the cart of leeches is wheeled away, one turns briefly in its jar to look at you. Or maybe you're hallucinating. Either way, the worst is over, for now. You're blooded, balanced, and blessed by the world's most misunderstood slug. You wake up, vaguely aware of a dull ache where the leeches had their tiny, earnest buffet. You sit up slowly, hoping for a bit of peace, and immediately wish you hadn't. There's a man at your bedside holding a candle and a long, curved metal tube. He smiles. "Time for your smoke." You blink. "My what?" "Fumigation," he says. "For your bowels." Ah, yes. We've arrived at the tobacco smoke enema. Take a deep breath, or, well, maybe don't. Once upon a time, especially in the 17th and 18th centuries, European medicine was positively obsessed with stimulating the body through creative routes. The idea of blowing smoke directly into the rectum wasn't considered indecent or absurd. No, it was a serious emergency intervention. Drowning victim? You blast them with a lungful of tobacco and hope for the best. Chills. Puff it right up there. Respiratory weakness? Up it goes. Tobacco, a new world gift to Europe, was believed to be a warm and drying agent, which made it perfect for treating cold, damp conditions, like near-death, paralysis, or what they loosely called torpor. You're feeling torporish now just imagining it. The kit for this bizarre rescue mission included a bellows, a tube, and a disturbing level of confidence. Physicians and even river rescue teams in London kept them on hand like a defibrillator today. Drown in the Thames? Congratulations, you're about to get smoked from the other end. Historians still argue whether the treatment was driven more by medical science or just a desperate hope that something would jolt the body back to life. Some point to case records claiming revived patients. Others suggest that even if it didn't work, the sheer indignity of it might startle you awake. Back in your uncomfortable cot, the candle holder gestures for you to roll over. You politely decline. He shrugs and moves on to the next patient. Someone coughs in the distance, probably trying to hide their giggle. But smoke wasn't the only strange thing going into bodies in the name of health. Enemas of all sorts were the rage, and they were applied frequently, ritually, and with enthusiastic flair. In 17th century France, high society boasted gold-plated enema syringes, custom-crafted and passed down like jewelry. Think of it as a gastrointestinal inheritance. Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, was said to have received over 2,000 enemas in his lifetime, many in public. A court physician might pause mid-conversation, administer a quick flush of herbs and warm water, and carry on with statecraft. You imagine political arguments becoming unusually cooperative after a shared chamomile infusion. And then there was the fringe concept of wine enemas, often spiced and warm, said to invigorate the liver. Some Roman physicians paired this with a bloodletting session and a garlic poultice to reset the system. You wonder how anyone ever survived Roman medicine with their dignity intact. Let's not forget the Native American practices, particularly among some eastern woodlands tribes, who used tobacco smoke not rectally, but nasally, inhaling it deeply during rituals or healing ceremonies. European colonists took this and modified the route in their ever-imaginative way. A curious side note, smoke enemas eventually found their way into early resuscitation manuals, with illustrations. Yes, you can actually see diagrams of a Victorian gentleman blowing smoke up a patient's backside, bellows in one hand, monocle in the other. Probably humming a polite tune. It's all very decorous. If you ignore the situation, you're now being offered a revitalizing tonic. You hesitate. It smells of cloves, turpentine, and something distinctly like fireplace ash. You sip and instantly regret everything. It cleanses the lungs, the nurse explains, from the inside out. You ask if that includes your taste buds. She doesn't laugh. Suddenly, a frazzled healer runs in with a scroll and shouts, "The prince has collapsed. Fetch the smoking kit." Everyone rushes out. You lie still, clutching your blanket, extremely aware of every internal organ and whether it might soon become a chimney. You hear murmurs from the hallway. Someone's suggesting adding pepper powder to the smoke. To make it more motivating, they say. Another voice offers mint. Another shouts, "Add sulfur. That'll shake him." You don't know who the prince is, but he's about to experience aromatherapy on a spiritual level. Interestingly, the practice didn't entirely die with powdered wigs. Well into the 19th century, smoke enemas were advertised in certain health manuals as reviving agents. It wasn't until the British Royal Humane Society, yes, that was a thing, finally stopped recommending it that the practice fizzled, pun intended. A quirky note. The tubes and bellows from these kits were sometimes repurposed as musical instruments by children, unaware of their previous journeys. If that doesn't keep you up at night, nothing will. Even today, the legacy survives in odd places. Certain detox programs, thankfully not mainstream, claim that herbal steam rectal therapies can cleanse energy pathways. That's a no from you, thanks. You lie back and try to focus on something pleasant. A cloud. A breeze. Literally anything that doesn't involve being filled with warm fog like an old cathedral. But the smell of smoke lingers. Somewhere down the hall, someone has revived, someone has screamed, and someone's tube is being scrubbed. With mint leaves, you hope. You close your eyes, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude that you live in a time where your resuscitation doesn't require a chimney sweep. You're not cured, exactly. But you are reminded that human ingenuity, for better or worse, has no limits. You shuffle down the corridor, still light-headed from the smoke and herbs fiasco, and find yourself in a dimly lit chamber that smells like vinegar and meat gone suspiciously poetic. There's a row of wooden tables and a man in a velvet robe, turning what appears to be a cooked skull over in his hands. "Don't worry," he says, not looking up. "It's all part of the healing. Tonight, your treatment involves medicinal cannibalism." And yes, that's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. For centuries, European physicians, especially between the 16th and 18th centuries, enthusiastically prescribed human remains as cures. Not metaphorically. Literally. Bones, blood, fat, and even mummified flesh were all part of the pharmacy. Let's start with a mainstream fact. The idea of ingesting human parts for health wasn't just some fringe practice. It was often royally endorsed. King Charles II of England, for example, had his own personal concoction called the King's Drops, a health tonic made from powdered human skulls soaked in alcohol. He believed it restored energy and warded off fits. Some say it helped with his frequent headaches. Others say it was just strong enough to make him forget he had a kingdom to run. You've been handed a small spoonful of dark, flaky powder. This is for your tremors. the attendant says gently. Distilled from a young man hanged last spring. Very fresh. You stare at the spoon. The room tilts. Mummy powder, also known as mumia, was one of the most popular medicinal substances of its time. Ground from Egyptian mummies, yes, actual mummies, and sold across apothecaries in Europe, it was thought to contain vital essence preserved by the embalming process. For the wealthy elite, taking mumia was like swallowing bottled immortality. Ironically, it often gave them nothing but diarrhea and gout. Historians still argue whether most mumia actually came from real mummies or whether it was fabricated with dried peasants and resin. The Egyptian government certainly noticed the tomb raiding and wasn't thrilled. You might say it was an early case of cultural appropriation, with snacks. A fringe tidbit? Some physicians swore by gladiator blood in ancient Rome. Believed to cure epilepsy, it was served warm after a fresh execution. You picture a noblewoman in a toga, sipping from a chalice and thinking, earthy. You glance around the chamber. There's a wall of jars, each neatly labeled in Latin. Pulvis cranii. Unguentum homini. Oleum manium. You translate with your dusty school Latin. Skull powder, human fat ointment, spirit oil of the dead. Lovely. You're handed a thin strip of linen soaked in a reddish liquid. Wrap this around your wrist, the assistant says. It contains rendered fat of a nobleman. You ask, casually, if it was voluntary. They don't answer. In 17th century Germany, physician Johann Schroeder wrote a detailed recipe for preparing human skull powder for epilepsy. The skull must be from a young person who died a violent death but not of disease. Boil it in wine, dry it, grind it. Best taken at dawn, he advises, as if that's the strange part. And yes, it wasn't just about the skulls. Human fat, especially from executed criminals, was used in salves and balms. It was considered effective against joint pain, swelling, and even rheumatism. Grave robbers, resurrectionists, and executioners became part-time suppliers for the medical market. One particularly quirky rumor from 18th century Denmark suggests that hospitals kept a fat quota, a minimum amount of human tissue to be harvested per month for ointment production. No one really knows if it was enforced, but the paperwork must have been gory. You lie down on a cool slab as a physician places a warm cloth across your chest. This, he says with pride, is a compress soaked in tincture of cadaver. You try to imagine something else. Kittens. Bread. A tax audit. Anything but tincture of cadaver. At some point in the 17th century, a French alchemist claimed that the soul of a person remained in the bones for several months after death and could be transferred through careful extraction. You suspect he was lonely and making excuses. Still, the logic behind medicinal cannibalism wasn't entirely spiritual. People believed that if life energy came from the body, then consuming parts of that body, especially from young, strong, or violently killed individuals, could pass on that strength. It's like drinking protein shakes. If your gym sold powdered Spartans. One particularly disturbing practice? The blood cure. In some town squares, executioners would set out fresh mugs of criminal blood for epileptics to drink. People came running, cups in hand, desperate for a warm dose. That, my friend, is dedication. You're now being offered a lozenge made with honey, crushed herbs, and what you can only hope is metaphorical skull essence. You tuck it under your tongue and taste clay, smoke, and something that reminds you of history class and poor decisions. Eventually, Enlightenment thinkers began questioning all this. Maybe, some whispered, we shouldn't eat people. Others responded with, but have you tried it with cinnamon? It took science, real science, to finally bury this chapter, though the practice lingered disturbingly long into the 19th century. You sit up, feeling slightly more energized and a lot more suspicious of every pill you've ever taken. The velvet-robed man waves you goodbye with fingers that look far too clean for what he's been mixing. You wonder how many patients before you had stronger stomachs, or fewer questions. And as you shuffle back toward your cot, your tongue still tingling with powdered farro, you whisper, please let the next treatment involve soup. Or maybe just a nap. You try to rest, truly. You lie very still and think of nice things, clouds, kittens, the exact opposite of powdered kings. But just as your eyes begin to droop, someone taps you awake with what can only be described as the softest clang of metal. You sit up groggily, and come face to face with a bucket of lice. Welcome to the world of therapeutic infestations. That's right. In some corners of history, deliberate infection was not a failure of hygiene, but a medical strategy. Why kill parasites when you can put them to work? The bucket is for demonstration, thank heavens. The healer, cheerful and far too alert for this hour, explains, "We used to believe certain ailments were best treated by attracting disease elsewhere in the body. Letting nature's little creatures balance your humors." You nod slowly, terrified of asking follow-up questions. Let's begin with leprosy, once thought incurable, but not for lack of creative effort. In medieval times, some physicians believed that inducing skin conditions could draw out leprosy's fiery humors. Enter lice. Not accidentally caught, but purposefully bred and applied. A person would sit in a warm room, head shaved, scalp rubbed with meat or milk, and then, lice sprinkled gently like pepper on pasta. The theory: these pests would consume the disease through their blood meals. And when the lice became fat and sluggish, the healer would carefully harvest them. Kind of like pest-based dialysis. You wonder how anyone kept a straight face through this. Historians still argue whether this was taken seriously or merely a last resort, but multiple texts, especially in Eastern Europe, mention this practice with startling confidence. One Bohemian monk claimed he cured 3 villagers with a single lice colony and some patients. You'd have preferred aspirin. A fringe example from 17th century Russia? Wealthy noblewomen sometimes wore flea necklaces, which were small pouches of cloth filled with warm blood or sweetened bread, tied around the neck to draw parasites away from the face. It was beauty and bloodletting in one dainty package. You're now shown a treatment room labeled warming ward. You enter, only to be nearly knocked over by the scent of sulfur, garlic, and hot cheese. In one corner, someone is covered in what looks like mashed turnip and is being encouraged to sweat for balance. Across from them, a man is trying to remain perfectly still while leeches crawl up his legs, not to bite, but just to locate the sickness. Another patient lifts a ragged curtain. "They're doing maggots next door," he whispers. "Real ones." You nod, suddenly craving a salad and a shower. Now, don't mistake these disturbing efforts for total quackery. Maggot therapy, for instance, actually works. Modern hospitals use sterilized maggots to clean necrotic wounds, as they selectively consume dead tissue and leave the healthy bits alone. It's gruesome but effective. But let's not forget how much of this was uncontrolled, unscientific, and wildly improvised. In 18th century France, people believed bedbugs cured hysteria. Sufferers were instructed to sleep with them under the mattress, or in one horrific version, in the pillow. The idea was to startle the nervous system back to normal by surrounding it with micromonsters. Charming. A mainstream fact. In ancient China, the ingestion of certain insects, like beetles or centipedes, was believed to choke out inner poison. Crushed into teas or swallowed whole, they were said to balance the body's qi. In one case, a particularly respected healer created a beetle-based fever remedy that was used well into the 19th century. You wonder how it paired with chamomile. At this point, the healer offers you a calming foot bath, filled with live eels. "They nibble the negative energies," she says with a straight face. You slide your foot in and immediately yelp. The eels wriggle joyfully. One bites your toe, gently. That means it's working. Another healer strides in holding what can only be described as a ferret in a harness. "This," he says proudly, "is for treating melancholia." The ferret, apparently trained to crawl into your shirt and snuggle your spine, is believed to coax joy back into the system through tickling and warmth. This one's name is Marcel. He looks mildly annoyed. You decline Marcel's services, and instead opt for the vapor room, which smells like a greenhouse and feels like breathing through a salad. You're handed a thin cloth to drape over your head while smoldering beetle shells heat in a bowl beneath you. "To purge winter air," the assistant says. Somewhere behind you, someone yells, "Bring the toad!" You don't turn around. A lesser-known historical remedy? Certain medieval midwives used toad powder, that is, toads that were dried, ground, and sprinkled into wine, as a labor stimulant. Today, we call that a lawsuit waiting to happen. A final curious tidbit. In some folk traditions from Eastern Europe, there's a documented practice of placing ticks behind the ears to absorb heartbreak. The ticks were later burned in a ritual meant to transfer sorrow into smoke. Poetic. Creepy. Effective. Historians shrug. You finally emerge from the ward, covered in various oils, 2 fleas, and possibly 1 tick. You sweat yourself and limp back to your cot, refusing eye contact with anyone holding a jar. As you curl back under the itchy blanket, you reflect on one inescapable truth: humans will try literally anything. And somewhere, somehow, someone once swore by it. You close your eyes and hope your dreams tonight are louse-free, eel-free, and entirely ferret-optional. You wake up feeling odd. Not worse, not better, just unusually aware of your own veins. That's when you notice the assistant at your bedside, holding what appears to be a tiny golden hammer and a long needle. "Good morning," she chirps. "Today, we try trepanation." You freeze. Trepanation. The ancient and enduring practice of drilling a hole into your skull. Not to remove a tumor or insert a microchip, but to let something out. Pressure. Spirits. Bad thoughts. It depends who you ask, and when. She reassures you, "Don't worry, we don't do the whole hole anymore. Just a respectful dent." You consider screaming, but your body is busy trying to disappear into the mattress. This might be one of the oldest surgeries in the world. Mainstream historians agree that trepanation has been practiced since at least 7000 BCE, with skulls found in Neolithic burial sites across Peru, France, and Russia showing signs of careful, deliberate boring. Astonishingly, some of these skulls show regrowth, meaning the patients lived. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual or medicinal, the assistant says gently, tapping her little hammer like a xylophone. But it worked, you know. Sometimes. You're now being led into a softly lit room filled with reclining chairs, a gentle humming noise in the background, and on the far wall, a gallery of cracked skulls in glass cases. Each has a hole about the size of a silver coin, perfectly round, smoothed around the edges. You wonder if their former owners found enlightenment or just a very long headache. Some believed trepanation allowed evil spirits to escape, especially in cases of madness, epilepsy, or migraines. Others thought it released pressure building in the brain, centuries before anyone understood intracranial trauma. As usual, they were wrong in the right direction. A fringe tidbit? In the 19th century, there was a minor revival of trepanation among certain fringe groups in Britain and the US. They weren't doctors, just spiritualists and cranial explorers who believed opening the skull could enhance consciousness. One Dutch woman famously trepanned herself on camera in the 1990s, describing the result as a soft feeling of floating clarity. Modern neurosurgeons refer to this as a very lucky miss. Back in your chair, the assistant tells you they won't be doing a full bore today, just a simulation with chilled water and a vibrating crown. You nod, relieved, but also deeply suspicious. She begins the demo, humming a lullaby. Meanwhile, another healer nearby is showing a group of apprentices how ancient Incan surgeons used obsidian blades to cut into the scalp. The Inca were particularly skilled trepanners, with some survival rates estimated as high as 80%, higher than Civil War field hospitals. Of course, they had no anesthesia or antiseptic, just herbs, prayer, and really steady hands. You wince as the vibration hums across your forehead. It's more psychological than painful. The assistant leans in, whispering, "Imagine your bad thoughts draining out. Your regrets, your worries. Even that time you sent a risky text at 2 a.m. It's strangely calming. In medieval Europe, trepanation became a favored cure for brain fever and skull demons. One 14th century physician wrote that a woman suffering hallucinations was calmed after her brow was opened and salted. You don't know what's worse, the opening or the seasoning. There's a quiet moment now, and the assistant invites you to touch a real trepanned skull. It's smooth, surprisingly light. She places your finger over the hole and says, "That belonged to a soldier. He lived 12 years after the operation. Took up poetry." You blink. Did the poetry get better? She shrugs. Tastes vary. In Renaissance Italy, barber surgeons offered trepanation as part of their services, right alongside tooth-pulling and bloodletting. A man could get a haircut and a cranial release before lunch. One satirical pamphlet from 1523 shows a crowd lining up at a trepan cart, all clutching coins and complaining of foggy thinking. You wonder if this was the medieval version of a juice cleanse. And speaking of bloodletting, it often followed trepanation. To cool the humors, of course. Because drilling a hole in the head wasn't dramatic enough without a pint of blood and a bowl of leeches to follow. Some patients reported hearing music or voices after the procedure. Whether this was divine awakening or just pressure on the auditory cortex, we'll never know. But it certainly gave the healers something to point to. You're offered a cup of rosemary water and a damp cloth for your forehead. You've done well, the assistant smiles. No actual holes today. Just historical empathy. You lie back in the chair, heartbeat finally slowing, and think about what it means to poke a hole in your own head and call it wellness. If nothing else, it shows how far people have gone to chase peace of mind. Literally. You head back to your cot, a little dizzy, a little curious, and very certain that no matter how bad your next headache gets, you'll just take Tylenol. You wake this time to a soft rustling at your feet. It sounds like someone unwrapping dried leaves, or perhaps assembling a salad with intent. You lift your head, and immediately regret it. Because now you see what they're arranging on your legs, a poultice made of raw animal dung. Tonight, we dig into the nauseating realm of excrement-based medicine. Feces, urine, bile, all lovingly smeared, swallowed, or steeped in pursuit of a cure. You roll your eyes back into your head and briefly wish you were dreaming. You are not. Across cultures and centuries, people genuinely believed excrement held healing properties. Especially when it came from a sacred animal, a healthy child, or was delivered during a specific moon phase. The logic. Something that exits the body might also draw out illness. Or balance your insides by shocking your system. Either way, you're stuck with poop. Let's start with ancient Egypt. This isn't fringe lore. Mainstream historians confirm that Egyptian physicians used crocodile dung as a contraceptive agent. Mixed with honey and sometimes natron, it was formed into a kind of vaginal pessary, then inserted. The belief was that the material's dense texture and smell would prevent conception. You can't help but think this may have worked simply by killing the mood. Historians still argue whether this practice was symbolic, invoking the crocodile goddess Tauret, protector of women, or just early chemistry. Either way, it's proof that some people truly went to unpleasant lengths for birth control. And then we have camel dung tea. Yes, really. Among certain Bedouin tribes, it was believed that drinking tea brewed with dried camel droppings could cure dysentery. The logic. The camel's mighty gut would kill off pathogens, making its waste medicinal. Modern science later found that this treatment did, in fact, contain natural antibiotics. Still, you'd prefer Pepto-Bismol. Now you glance down and see that your own legs have been wrapped in a thick mixture of goose feces, herbs, and crushed bark. This, your healer says, was a favored 17th century European remedy for cramp of the limbs. You've heard of icy hot. This is more runny lukewarm. Next to you, someone is being massaged with pig bile mixed into lard, supposedly to soften the soul and cleanse melancholy. He doesn't look convinced. In ancient Greece, physicians like Hippocrates believed that human earwax and feces had use in treating infections, both applied externally and, horrifyingly, swallowed in certain concoctions. According to one preserved scroll, goat droppings, crushed and steeped in wine, were prescribed for nosebleeds. The idea was to confuse the body, present it with an internal shock so it stops the external flow. You gag. Silently. Let's not forget Rome, where urine was big business. It was collected in public jars and sold to tanners, dentists, and healers. It contained ammonia, after all, so it bleached teeth, disinfected wounds, and even softened fabrics. The Emperor Vespasian famously taxed the urine trade. One of his critics sniffed at the idea of taxing something so disgusting, to which he held up a coin and replied, "Pecunia non olet, money doesn't stink." In traditional Chinese medicine, yellow soup was a mixture of fermented feces and water given to patients with severe digestive disorders. As revolting as it sounds, some of its microbial properties may have prefigured modern fecal microbiota transplants, the clean, sterile cousin of this historic horror. A kind of unintentional probiotic. Meanwhile, in Europe's medieval monasteries, monks would sometimes rub warm cow dung onto boils or infected wounds. The heat and texture were thought to draw out the rot. Whether it worked or simply added more bacteria is still debated. Probably both. And let's talk about child urine. In 16th century England, urine of a male child under 7 was prized for treating gout, sore throat, and even cancer. Physicians believed it was pure and filled with untapped healing energy. It was either drunk straight, hold your horror, or distilled into tonics. Queen Elizabeth I was rumored to use a urine-based face wash. If true, her complexion was braver than her politics. Your healer now cheerfully approaches with a bowl. You dare to ask what's in it. She replies, donkey dung, fermented goat milk, and blessed wine, just a forehead compress. For clarity, you let out a muffled whimper and lie back down. A fringe but fascinating tidbit? In some rural Irish folk practices, chicken droppings were baked into bread and consumed to banish stubborn spirits. The idea was that evil entities would flee from such an unholy mixture, or be lured out in confusion. At this point, you shuffle to the wash station, where water is suspiciously brown and smells faintly of sulfur. You opt for a dry towel instead. One of the assistants mentions that Aztec healers sometimes prescribed dog feces mixed with herbs for certain skin conditions and spiritual cleansing rituals. If the gods didn't forgive you, the stench might. By the time you make it back to your cot, you've scrubbed your legs raw with lavender and mint leaves. But you're also oddly impressed. The sheer confidence it must have taken to look at a steaming pile and think, "You know what this needs? My body." You lie back and whisper a quiet thank you to modern plumbing, hygiene, and the pharmaceutical aisle at Walgreens. You wake to the unmistakable sound of boiling metal. Not the clatter of pots or the hiss of tea, but a deeper, more sinister bubbling, like something unholy preparing itself. You turn your head slowly and see a bronze ladle hovering over a fire, filled with molten gold. Your heart stutters. Because today, your treatment plan involves liquid metal therapy. Across time, cultures have believed that ingesting or applying precious metals could heal the body, purify the soul, and occasionally, let's be honest, show off. But often, these so-called luxury cures were less about wellness and more about demonstrating that you were rich enough to die extravagantly. Open wide, the healer smiles, holding up a golden spoon. Just a drop today. Let's not gild the lily too much. Let's start with a particularly famous victim of this trend. King Ferdinand II of Aragon, who reportedly received gold therapy for his failing health in the early 1500s. He didn't survive the experience. Not surprising, since drinking dissolved gold in alcohol, known as aurum potable, was more alchemy than medicine. Mainstream historians confirm that gold ingestion was especially popular during the Renaissance, when physicians and charlatans alike promoted it as a cure-all. It replenishes the body's noble elements, one 17th century text declares, and aligns one with the sun. You assume they meant metaphorically, but if you're glowing after drinking gold, something's gone very wrong. Historians still argue whether this practice came from genuine medicinal interest or just desperation to impress. Either way, liquid gold remained a coveted elixir of life, expensive, rare, and fatal in large doses. Beside you, someone is getting an eyebrow massage with a roller made from pure mercury. You choke slightly. Mercury, also called quicksilver, was once considered the height of medicine, especially in ancient China and medieval Europe. Alchemists believed it held the power to balance the body's elements and even grant immortality. You might remember Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. Obsessed with living forever, he consumed pills made of mercury and jade powder daily. Spoiler alert, he died. His mausoleum, by the way, is rumored to be surrounded by rivers of liquid mercury, his posthumous security system. The healer now rubs your temples with silver leaf balm, cooing, "Silver soothes the nerves." You smile politely and try not to imagine your neurons turning into holiday tinsel. Silver, unlike mercury or gold, actually has mild antimicrobial properties, and it's still used in modern wound dressings and some creams. But back then, they didn't stop at topical. In the 19th century, collargillum or colloidal silver was all the rage. Drink enough, and your skin might turn blue, a condition known as argyria. One gentleman in the 1900s became so blue-gray that newspapers dubbed him the Silver Man. Good for Halloween, less so for long-term dating prospects. Next to you, another patient is being prepped for lead-based eyeliner, a direct throwback to ancient Egyptian cosmetics. Cleopatra may have looked stunning, but her signature kohl likely gave her lead poisoning. The irony of beauty killing you? Timeless. The healer lifts a bowl. Inside is powdered copper mixed with vinegar. For liver health, she says. In ancient Greece and Rome, copper was considered a purifier of blood and bile, often ingested in small doses or rubbed into wounds. Some believed it could align your inner fire. You assume they meant metaphorical inflammation, not spontaneous combustion. Now here's a delightful fringe tidbit. In 16th century Europe, there was a short-lived trend of creating golden mummies. Upon death, wealthy individuals were embalmed with gold powder, herbs, and resins, so their bodies could heal in the afterlife. Imagine your ghost self shimmering under candlelight, whispering about your gilded spleen. Back to the present. Or rather, the strangely timeless hospital tent you're in. A nearby patient is being offered a copper spoonful of arsenic, mixed with crushed pearls and honey. Arsenic, yes, that one, was once considered an energizing tonic when taken in microdoses. In 19th century Austria, arsenic eaters swore it made their cheeks rosy and lungs strong. It probably also shaved years off their lives. You, meanwhile, are now being asked to place a small gold pellet under your tongue. Don't swallow until it melts, the healer says, then turns away to stir her vat of molten metal. You do as told, tongue tingling. It's surprisingly flavorless. Maybe death is subtle. Let's not forget Napoleon's downfall, often linked to arsenic traces found in his hair. Some say it came from medicinal tonics, others from the green wallpaper in his room, dyed with arsenic-based pigment. Either way, it proves that even an emperor can be undone by the wrong shade of toxic chic. Your healer returns and proudly announces that today's session will end with a platinum steam cleanse, once reserved for the Persian elite. You're not sure how they steam platinum, but you no longer ask questions. The metal fumes have made your voice fuzzy and your teeth feel like they're humming. You stagger out into the night air, metallic breath fogging in the breeze. The sky above seems faintly gilded, or maybe that's just the light-headedness. You've survived molten treatments, silver salves, and enough bizarre ointments to fill a medieval apothecary. You sit by the fire, whispering to your reflection in a brass mirror, "Next time, maybe just ginger tea." You don't even pretend to be surprised when you wake up on a bed of crushed seashells. At this point, your skin smells like damp metal, your breath might ignite kindling, and you've had weirder dreams fully awake than you've ever had asleep. You brace yourself as someone taps your shoulder. "Time for your toad plaster," they whisper. Of course it is. Today's wellness regimen explores the world of animal-based cures, and not just the dung and bile varieties we've already endured. No, tonight's star remedies are a veritable Noah's Ark of suffering and strangeness: lizards in wine, powdered bones, bloodletting geese, and dried toad hats. You begin to long for something simple, like a stethoscope or sanity. Your first treatment involves exactly what it sounds like: a plaster made from dried toads. This was a real European folk remedy, especially during the 17th century. Physicians believed that placing a dried toad, or sometimes just its pulverized parts, on the head or chest could cure fevers, convulsions, and even the plague. Because what better way to fight off death than by strapping a dead amphibian to your forehead? Historians still argue whether this was based on genuine belief in animal essences, or simply the desperate logic of nothing else has worked, so let's try the toad. Either way, you can feel its cool, powdery texture press against your temple. It smells like ancient pond and despair. Beside you, someone is sipping a hot broth made from boiled vipers, a delicacy in 16th century Italy. Physicians believed snake meat could rejuvenate the blood, treat skin ailments, and improve virility. It's worth noting that Pope Clement VII was said to enjoy a viper soup for longevity. He died anyway. Mainstream historical records confirm that many elite medical professionals swore by these treatments. Vipers, believed to contain natural fire, were thought to counteract the body's excess moisture. In other words, if you were feeling sluggish or too damp, an actual medieval diagnosis, a snake would fix you right up. You quietly decide to remain sluggish. Next, the healer approaches you with a jar of crushed millipedes mixed with oil and honey. It's meant to treat asthma, she says. You raise one eyebrow, skeptically. She adds, and nightmares. You raise the other. This treatment was popular in parts of 18th century Eastern Europe, where millipedes were steeped in alcohol or rendered into a paste to be applied to the chest. The rationale. Their curling nature was thought to coil away illness. It's not clear how effective it was, but you're starting to think anyone who tried it never had the courage to get sick again. To your left, someone is getting their joints wrapped in cat fur soaked in goose fat. The warmth and texture were believed to relieve arthritis in some 19th century folk traditions. And while modern science may scoff, you can't deny that it looks kind of cozy, if a little emotionally scarring for the cat. Now comes the oxbone tea, boiled, blackened, and bitter. You're told it's to strengthen the spleen and align your humors. You sip once and immediately regret all of your life choices. Let's take a detour through ancient Rome, where gladiator blood was considered a potent cure for epilepsy. The belief was that the blood of a strong man, spilled in combat, still held spiritual energy. Spectators would sometimes scramble to collect it, dipping cloths or even drinking it fresh. Fringe as it sounds, this practice is confirmed by several Roman sources. And no, it was not considered weird. Just spirited. You close your eyes and shudder. In India, cow urine, known as gamutra, has been used in Ayurvedic medicine for centuries, believed to balance the doshas, cleanse the digestive system, and even sharpen the mind. It's still used today in some traditional healing practices, although modern research is, let's say, skeptical with caution. The healer now offers you a balm made from bat wings and ox marrow, mashed into a gray putty. It's to be rubbed on the soles of your feet to steal back energy from death. You ask if it works. She shrugs. In some African and South American cultures, animal sacrifice was tied closely to healing rituals. While often more symbolic than medical, portions of the animal, liver, heart, or even hide, were sometimes applied to the afflicted person or consumed in small quantities. The idea was to absorb the creature's strength and sacred vitality. Historians still argue whether these were more spiritual acts or practical attempts at nutrition. You overhear a nearby patient muttering through gritted teeth, "They gave me crushed beetles for my migraine." You think he's joking. He is not. One fringe tidbit that nearly tips you over the edge. In medieval Europe, it was believed that sleeping with a live frog in your mouth overnight could cure a sore throat. The idea being that the illness would transfer into the frog, leaving you refreshed and the frog, well, existentially traumatized. Now you're handed a strange tincture made from lizard tails and spiced wine. This one was a favorite in ancient Persia, believed to banish melancholy and light the soul. You take a cautious sip. It's earthy, also mildly horrifying. As you lay back down, your skin now coated in a thin sheen of animal fats and oils, the night air cools your face. The moon glints off the jar of viper broth on your bedside table. You realize with solemn dread that you are starting to develop a taste for strange teas. And then someone asks if you'd like a roasted mouse poultice for your next session. You laugh, because of course you would. You are now one with the bizarre, one poultice away from transcendence, and possibly one toad short of a medical miracle. You wake up with something soft and grainy sprinkled across your chest. It smells faintly floral, pleasant, even, until you lift your hand and realize it's powdered mummy. Yep. You're now participating in one of the most bizarre medical fads of all time, the literal consumption of ancient corpses. Tonight, you're not just a patient, you're an accessory to historical looting. For centuries, particularly between the 12th and 17th centuries, European apothecaries sold a substance called mumia, made by grinding up the embalmed remains of Egyptian mummies. Doctors and patients alike believed it to be a powerful remedy for everything from headaches and ulcers to internal bleeding and vapors, the mysterious catch-all for anything inconvenient and emotional. You try not to breathe too deeply. Because yes, that's powdered human on your chest. And yes, someone is stirring more into your tea. Historians still argue whether people genuinely knew they were consuming real human remains or thought it was just some mystical resin. But the fact remains, actual mummies were exhumed, ground up, and sold by the pound for centuries. There was even a luxury market. Pharmacies boasted of having authentic Egyptian stock, as if they were offering fine wine. And it wasn't fringe. Francis Bacon and King Charles II are both said to have partaken in mumia tonics. Charles reportedly even made his own special tincture using powdered skull, because nothing says, "Long live the king," like a cup of royalty with a splash of bone. You're handed a spoon. The healer insists the powdered mummy has been blended with lavender and honey to ease the taste of eternity. You decline. She shrugs and sprinkles some into your hairline instead. Apparently, it's also good for memory. The irony writes itself. Across from you, someone's rubbing a thick salve into their elbow, a concoction made from human fat. In the 16th and 17th centuries, human grease, or unguentum hominis, was harvested from the bodies of executed criminals and sold on the black market for its supposed healing power. It was used especially to treat broken bones, nerve pain, and even gout. Mainstream accounts, like those from German and Dutch apothecaries, confirm this grim practice. Physicians would source fresh fat and blend it with herbs or turpentine. You wonder what kind of business card one would hand out for that profession. One of the weirder beliefs from this period was the sympathetic cure, which involved treating a weapon rather than the wound. Here's how it worked. Let's say you got stabbed. Instead of applying medicine to your injury, a healer would apply a human-based salve, sometimes made with blood, fat, or mummy, to the weapon that hurt you. Supposedly, the wound would heal via mystical connection. Fringe and strange. Absolutely. But respectable scientists of the day, including Sir Kenelm Digby, swore by it. And let's be honest, if someone handed you a knife coated in human fat and told you it would cure your cut, would you argue? Or just back away slowly? You reach for some water to rinse the aftertaste of history out of your mouth, but it's not water, it's a tincture made from crushed skull and moss, another medieval favorite. This time, the moss was the type that grew on human skulls in graveyards, considered especially potent. It was said to treat nosebleeds, epilepsy, and even melancholy. The healer adds, only skulls from suicides, though. More spiritually charged. You blink twice. That's not comforting. Let's not forget blood cures, an enduring obsession through the centuries. Drinking fresh human blood was believed to restore youth and vitality. Public executions often drew crowds, not just for entertainment, but for access to warm cures. Some would pay to dip cloths or fingers in the pooling blood of the condemned, believing it to carry away illness. It's a miracle medieval hangovers weren't fatal. There's one case of a German epileptic boy in the 1600s who was regularly given still warm blood from executed criminals by his family. He got better, they said. Historians still debate whether it was the blood or just terror. You're then handed a bone powder lozenge, shaped like a little star. Ground femur and cinnamon, the healer whispers. Popular in Venice. You pop it in your mouth before thinking. It's chalky, warm, oddly comforting. You hate that you like it. You hear a chant behind you. A group has gathered around a candle made from tallow and human marrow, said to light the soul and ward off spirits. In some dark corners of Eastern Europe, such candles were burned during ceremonies to summon healing dreams or to commune with ancestors. Whether they actually healed anything is, let's just say, highly debated. Then there's the King's Touch, a ritual where English and French monarchs would physically touch those suffering from scrofula, a form of tuberculosis, believing their divine right could cure illness. The sick traveled for miles just to be touched by royalty, often receiving a coin or token to seal the blessing. No ground-up mummy involved here, just monarchic charisma and contagious optimism. The healer now draws a soft line of ash across your forehead. Crushed phalanges from a saint's relic, she says. You nod vaguely. It feels cool and sacred, even if your inner skeptic is already Googling side effects. And finally, for good measure, someone hands you a jar of medicinal jam made with rosehips, sugar, and pulverized ancient farro. You politely smear it on toast and pretend it's just fig spread. You lie back, the scent of old books, honey, and human dust rising around you. This was not the spa day you imagined. But maybe, just maybe, it was the strangest one you'll ever have. Which, given the last 13 treatments, is saying a lot. You awaken to a sharp tug on your scalp. No, it's not lice, or at least not the normal kind. A healer is threading something through your hair, mumbling about channeling celestial energy. You glance sideways into a bronze mirror and catch a glimpse of it, a lodestone tiara strapped tightly around your head, its jagged edges glinting with magnetic intensity. That's right. Tonight, we dive into the electrifying, tingling, sometimes straight-up sizzling world of early electrotherapy and magnetism. If you're imagining Frankenstein-like bolts shooting through your body, you're only slightly off. Long before science had any clue what electricity actually did in the body, healers, inventors, and charlatans were absolutely zapping people in the name of better health. You feel the faint hum of the lodestone as it presses into your temples. Lodestones, naturally magnetized pieces of mineral magnetite, were used for centuries to rebalance the humors, especially in treating melancholy or so-called stagnant blood. Some physicians in the 16th century believed magnetic force could pull invisible toxins from the body, kind of like the world's most aggressive detox facial. Historians still argue whether these early experiments were pure showmanship or genuinely driven by medical curiosity. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between, and powered by static cling. You're guided now to a darkened corner where a woman lies motionless beneath a velvet blanket. Her healer holds up what looks like a metal wand connected to a hand crank. With a few furious spins, it begins to spark. This is a Leyden jar, one of the first devices ever used to store and discharge static electricity. Popular in the 18th century, it was often used in salons and medical demonstrations, where people paid to feel reinvigorated by sudden jolts of power. You're offered a turn. And yes, against your better judgment, you take it. The shock zips through your fingertips like a carbonated ghost. Your teeth chatter, your toes curl, and you kind of like it. You'll blame the brain fog. Back in the day, people believed that electricity stimulated the soul. Some thought it could banish demons, others claimed it cured hysteria or impotence. One particularly bold physician in Vienna used mild electroshocks to treat migraines, female nervous disorders, and even constipation. Spoiler, you'd never sit the same way again. Mainstream historical fact? Benjamin Franklin, yes, that Franklin, conducted hundreds of experiments with Leyden jars, kites, and static generators, believing electricity was a form of divine energy that could be harnessed for health. His work directly inspired a surge of amateur and professional electric healers throughout Europe and America. Of course, this led to the rise of electroquackery, the proud parent of today's questionable wellness gadgets. 19th century ads promised that strapping copper plates to your knees would banish arthritis, or that electrified belts worn near your hips could revitalize masculine vigor. You glance at the nearby shelf, and of course, there's one on display. You lie back down as someone drapes a wire mesh blanket over your legs. It's connected to a curious metal box that hums like a swarm of polite bees. A healer turns the crank again. Your limbs tingle, then float. The electric bath, a fringe Victorian treatment, supposedly stimulated circulation and brain function. Today, it would probably just void your warranty. They pass around a bowl of iron filings steeped in vinegar, meant to conduct earth energy and be drunk before sessions. It tastes like rust and regret. You gag. Someone else slurps it like soup. Then there's the animal magnetism phase. No, not your rugged charm. This was Franz Mesmer's theory that all living beings emit a kind of invisible magnetic fluid that can be manipulated for healing. Mesmer would use dramatic hand gestures, waving magnets over the body to redirect this flow. His mesmerism shows were part therapy, part theater, part group hypnosis, basically 18th century wellness raves. Historians still argue whether Mesmer was a fraud or a misunderstood genius. But many patients claimed miraculous recoveries, so either the magnets worked or the placebo effect was throwing a house party. Someone now places a crystal pendulum over your chest. It's not doing much, but it sure looks profound. Meanwhile, one man is having his bald scalp zapped with copper rods to restore virility and hair growth. The device crackles. His expression says he'll take the wig next time. Electricity wasn't limited to the physical body. Victorian electrotherapy chairs were designed to jolt your spine, realign your chi, though they didn't use that term, and boost spiritual receptivity. You're ushered into one now, a stiff, wooden recliner with ominous wires attached to the headrest. A gentle surge buzzes through your back. For a moment, it feels peaceful. Then your left eyebrow twitches uncontrollably. You think you hear music, but it might just be your neurons rearranging themselves. There's also a jar labeled voltaic eel extract, supposedly distilled from electric eels and used in Japan and Rome to treat joint pain and numbness. The science behind it is flimsy, but the legend is fun. Touching live eels for natural zaps was seen as a status symbol in ancient baths. You can't tell if this jar is for internal or external use. You decide. Neither. Finally, you're offered a shot of magnetized water, collected from a spring under a full moon and stirred with a silver rod. It's supposed to align the blood with the Earth's magnetic grid. You're just thirsty, so you drink it. Tastes like cold pennies. As you lie back under the wire blanket, your fingers faintly tingling, your scalp gently crackling, you feel a strange tranquility. Maybe it's the electricity balancing your humors. Or maybe you've just been lightly electrocuted into serenity. Either way, you've survived another round of shocking remedies. You wake with your eyes sealed shut, literally. Your lashes are glued together with something sticky, pungent, and suspiciously crunchy. You reach up to peel it off and feel the brittle flakes of honeyed frog skin. Tonight, we enter the thick, oozing world of ancient poultices and plaster treatments, where nearly anything you could mash, boil, or grind could end up on your face, and sometimes in your body. Let's begin with what's currently smothering your eyelids, a traditional Egyptian eye salve made of honey, goose fat, and pulverized crocodile dung. Used to treat conjunctivitis, styes, and evil eye infections, this blend had antimicrobial properties, thanks to the honey, but also packed a pungency strong enough to wake the dead. You can't help but wonder whether the infection or the cure was worse. Historians still argue whether Egyptian healers understood germ theory in a rudimentary way, or if they were simply mixing things based on trial and, very fragrant, error. Either way, it's impressive and deeply unsettling. As your vision clears, you spot a young man beside you, his face smeared with a paste of crushed pearl and vinegar, a Roman remedy for skin whitening and acne. Cleopatra supposedly swore by it, though let's be honest, if you're rich enough to grind up pearls, people will believe anything you say clears up pores. You sit up, only to discover your legs have been wrapped in bread dough poultices, crusty and warm. Ancient Mesopotamians believed fermenting grain drew out heat and infection, and would often slap the gooey mass directly onto wounds or bruises. You shift slightly, your shins now smell like sourdough starter. From another corner, a healer cheerfully waves what looks like a roasted mouse on a stick. Toothache remedy, she announces. In Elizabethan England, roasted mouse poultices were applied directly to sore gums or placed under pillows. Some even mixed the ashes with vinegar to create a rinse. You politely shake your head. No thank you. Toothaches can wait. Next comes the infamous cow dung and clay wrap, a staple of Ayurvedic and rural treatments in India. Traditionally used to cool fevers and reduce inflammation, The dried dung supposedly holds antibacterial properties, especially when mixed with turmeric and applied as a thick, mud-like coating. You feel the cold paste slap against your chest and brace for the smell. Still, it's better than what comes next: a poultice of boiled onions and moldy bread slapped onto an open wound. Surprisingly, this one holds up to modern scrutiny. Researchers have found that certain mold strains in old bread can act as natural antibiotics. Historians even point to this combo as an early forerunner to penicillin. Still, when someone's smushing hot, slippery onion bits against your arm, all you can think is, medieval hospitals were not for the faint of stomach. A woman next to you groans in relief as a healer places warm pigeon carcasses on her belly. Used in ancient Greece and Rome to treat plague symptoms and fevers, this method involved splitting the bird and laying it, still warm, on the patient to draw out toxins. The smell of meat and damp feathers fills the room. You don't even want to know how many pigeons one hospital could go through in a week. Then there's the truly nose-wrinkling mustard plaster, a Victorian favorite. Made from powdered mustard seed, flour, and vinegar, it's spread thick onto cloth and pressed against the chest to relieve congestion or rheumatism. Effective. Somewhat. Comfortable. Like being slowly roasted in horseradish. You lie back as they layer it across your sternum. Within seconds, the heat creeps in. Then the burn. Then the itching. You suddenly understand why people used to scream into pillows during treatment. Nearby, a woman is getting her skin scraped with a slug-based ointment. Yes, real slugs. In medieval Wales, healers would crush slugs into a slimy salve mixed with herbs, said to relieve joint pain and even arthritis. As the goo is smeared onto her knees, she sighs, either from relief or resignation. A healer offers you snail jelly, not as gross as it sounds. Ancient Greek texts recommend it for reducing facial inflammation and treating burns. It turns out snail mucin has actual regenerative properties. You hesitate, then dab a bit on your cheek. It's cold. Slimy. Oddly soothing. You hate to admit it's kind of working. They bring you a thick black paste made from soot, pig lard, and resin, an old Nordic wound sealant known as black salve. It was applied to deep cuts to create a protective barrier against infection and, in theory, evil spirits. You shiver as it touches your skin, wondering which burns more, the resin or the residual Viking judgment. There's also a leech-based lotion being stirred at the far end of the room. Not the live ones, just crushed, dried, and mixed with oils. In certain Renaissance texts, this was said to improve circulation and skin tone. You're beginning to realize that if it could crawl, bleed, or mold, someone somewhere thought it would make your skin glow. Next up is the fringe favorite, moss and harebrain poultice. An obscure medieval remedy from Eastern Europe, it claimed to treat epilepsy and frenzies of the mind. You don't have the heart to ask whose brain they're using tonight. You just keep your own thoughts quiet. You're handed a warm compress made of sheep's wool soaked in wine, another Roman treatment for swelling and bruising. Surprisingly pleasant, actually, like a weighted blanket dipped in Merlot. You don't want to take it off. Last, they offer a mysterious green poultice said to contain mold from the tomb of a bishop. Said to cure soul sickness and night terrors, it's applied silently, reverently, with the healer whispering blessings under her breath. You accept it. At this point, what's one more strange salve among friends? You lie back, a patchwork of crusts, goos, and ancestral mold smeared across your body. Somewhere beneath the layers, your skin might be healing, or plotting revenge. You awaken this time to a smell that defies all description. Part sulfur, part sewage, part something that definitely used to be alive. You try to sit up, but your arms are tightly swaddled in coarse linen bandages soaked with something suspiciously swampy. Welcome to the sickeningly creative world of urine-based therapies and foul fermentation treatments. Yes, you're now enrolled in a course no one wants to graduate from. Pee and pus, the unsung medical heroes of centuries past. First up is the jug sitting ominously by your bedside, a terracotta pot of aged human urine, affectionately called lant in medieval England. Used as a disinfectant, mouthwash, and skin treatment, stale urine was prized for its ammonia content. And right now, it's being poured, ever so gently, into a bowl where your hands soak like they're in some dystopian spa. Historians still argue whether people genuinely believed lint cured infections or if they simply ran out of cleaner options. Either way, it's a fact that urine was commonly used to wash wounds, sterilize tools, and even bleach clothes. You stare into the yellow-tinged liquid and think, suddenly, medieval fashion feels a little less glamorous. To your left, a man is having goat urine gently dribbled onto his scalp. Supposedly a Persian treatment for baldness, it was believed the enzymes and urea would stimulate follicles. He looks unconvinced. A pigeon watches from a rafter with judgment in its eyes. Your attention shifts to a bubbling ceramic pot marked fermented mud blood paste. You don't ask questions. You're told it's a mixture of swamp soil, pig's blood, and old wine, fermented in sunlight to draw out earthly poisons. It's slathered onto the feet of patients with fevers. You glance down. Too late. Your toes are already covered. Then there's the ever-popular sweat scrape therapy, common in Roman and Greek bathhouses. Patients with high fevers would be wrapped in wool blankets and made to sweat violently before healers scraped off the perspiration and reapplied it. Yes, reused sweat, as a topical balm for others. A shared cure is a strong cure, they'd say. You whisper back. Gross. You shift in your blanket and feel something warm slosh beneath you. That's right. It's animal bile compresses time. Boar bile, when mixed with butter and ashes, was used in medieval Europe to treat boils and carbuncles. You're not sure which part stings worse, the bile or your pride. A young apprentice walks by with a jug labeled Virgin's First Morning Water. You blink. Nope, not a euphemism. In several cultures, the first urine of a young, healthy woman was considered the most potent. Used for everything from eye infections to spiritual cleansing, it was revered and collected carefully. You try not to make eye contact as it's dabbed, gently, on your temples. Beside you, another patient is receiving the dubious honor of fermented sheep's milk enemas. Known as a gut rebirth in ancient Celtic tradition, this mixture of sour milk and herbs was believed to purge toxins and restore digestive harmony. He groans. The healer looks proud. You hold your breath. Then comes the truly rank, feces-based ointments. And yes, we're going there. Ancient Egyptian scrolls describe mixing crocodile dung with honey and herbs for treating hemorrhoids and infected wounds. In Europe, pig dung was sometimes applied to open sores. As for horse dung poultices, popular among rural healers in the 1700s, you stare at the brown smear on your arm. Denial helps. A lot. Interestingly, not all fermented substances were this off-putting. Soured barley water, left to rot just enough, was used as a hair rinse and antiseptic. It's sticky and smells faintly of vinegar, but compared to everything else, it's a pleasant surprise. You almost want to bottle it. Almost. At the foot of your cot, you hear the unmistakable sizzle of a hot dung brick, heated over fire and placed under beds to purify the air. Early sanitation through osmosis? Maybe. Or maybe just a weird way to fumigate a room with even worse smells. Historians still argue whether this was for genuine health or just traditional superstition. You're offered a cup of something called sweet rot cordial. It's a fermented blend of bruised berries, mead, and bark mold, thought to promote dreaming and cleanse the blood through the imagination. It's tart, earthy, and oddly numbing. You take a sip and feel your toes tingle. A neighboring patient receives cow urine eye drops, a treatment referenced in Indian Ayurveda for clearing cataracts. You're told it has purifying energy and antibacterial qualities. You're also told not to blink too much. He blinks anyway. The result is theatrical. And what of body pus transfusions? In some early 18th century French medical schools, healers believed that the pus from someone who had survived the plague carried antibodies and could be applied topically or even ingested in small doses. The practice was rare, highly controversial, and thankfully short-lived. But the mere thought makes your stomach do a cautious somersault. To distract yourself, you sniff the air and detect something sour, yet floral. It's rotted rose petal paste, used in Persian and Ottoman medicine to cool fevers and ease heartbreak. Crushed petals, fermented in goat's milk and sealed in clay jars for weeks, were smeared over the chest or massaged into the scalp. The scent is surprisingly calming, though that could just be your nose giving up. By now, you're a canvas of ancient biochemistry. Sweat, bile, rot, and fermentation, all mingling into a pungent cloud of pre-modern hope. Your skin prickles. Your nose twitches. Your dignity evaporates. And yet, beneath the layers of ancient filth, you feel something almost spiritual. The raw human instinct to heal with whatever's at hand, no matter how disgusting. A kind of grotesque ingenuity. A commitment to survive, even if it means rubbing goat pee on your bald spot and thanking the stars for it. You're lying there, barely more than a marinated experiment, when someone leans in with a crooked smile and a dripping ladle. "Time for the corpse medicine," they whisper. Your brain seizes. Your stomach flips. But alas, it's true. Mummy powder and body parts were once considered medicine, and now it's your turn to taste history's darkest prescription. They start with the most infamous, mumia, a powdered concoction made from ground-up mummified human remains. Sourced from ancient Egyptian tombs, or, let's be honest, any sun-dried corpse they could find, mumia was used for everything from headaches to hemorrhages. It was mixed with wine, swallowed in pills, or applied topically to bruises and wounds. The idea. The preserved body held on to the essence of life and healing power. You watch, horrified, as a pinch is sprinkled into your water like cinnamon into tea. You sip. It tastes like dust and bad karma. Historians still argue whether the European elite knew they were consuming real human remains or if they convinced themselves it was symbolic. Either way, by the 17th century, royalty and scholars were gulping down dead people like it was emergency. Next, someone approaches with a velvet pouch containing king's drops, a potion once prescribed by court physicians and believed to contain gold, opium, crushed pearls, and yes, a tincture of powdered skull. Said to cure epilepsy and strengthen the heart, it was often stirred into wine or sugar water. It hits your tongue like metal and mushrooms. You try to smile politely, but your eyes scream, "Help!" They lay you down and begin rubbing human fat ointment across your back. Sourced from executed criminals in early modern Germany and the Netherlands, it was believed that this criminal fat could cure joint pain, bruises, and broken bones. Apothecaries would pay executioners to harvest the fat, which was rendered down and mixed with herbs into a yellow salve called Armsunderfett, poor sinner's fat. You try not to think about where your massage oil came from. You fail. In another corner of the room, a nobleman receives a treatment known as the hangman's hand. Literally, a preserved hand from a recently executed man, believed to carry life energy. When stroked across the face or limbs, it was thought to heal paralysis and swellings. A servant waves the withered fingers near your legs. You feel nothing. Except maybe mild panic. Then there's skull moss, a greenish fuzz scraped from human skulls in churchyards. Apothecaries dried and powdered it, mixing it with honey or wine to treat nosebleeds and internal bleeding. The idea. If moss could grow on death, it must have power over life. You're handed a spoonful and instructed to let it dissolve under your tongue. You do. Your ancestors cringe in unison. You hear a whimper nearby and look over. A woman is biting down on a cloth while her surgeon packs a wound with blood-soaked rags from a warrior. It was believed the blood of a strong man, preferably one who died violently, could transfer vitality to the injured. You try to shift your focus to a happy memory. Any memory. They offer you dried liver slices from a plague victim, a rare and highly controversial prescription found in fringe medical records. Said to help protect against future outbreaks, it was eaten in slivers or brewed into a kind of meat tea. Even in its time, most people preferred to roll the dice with the plague. A man to your right receives a dose of powdered heart muscle, dried from the recently deceased and mixed with wine or egg yolk. Used as a treatment for fainting, melancholy, and sometimes infertility, it was considered a conduit of lost courage. You're fairly certain it's also a conduit for nightmares. There's even human bone broth, boiled from skeleton fragments, often gathered from ossuaries. Combined with spices and sometimes amber, it was drunk by the spoonful as a bone-strengthening elixir. You're handed a steaming cup. It tastes earthy, but not in a good way. Don't forget blood transfusion by ingestion. In the 17th century, some healers advised drinking the fresh blood of healthy young men, or animals, if none were available, to treat mental illness. Even some monarchs were rumored to have done it. The drink was supposed to restore youthful vigor. You stare into the chalice. You decline. A monk nearby is crushing a dried human placenta into powder for a noblewoman. This was used postpartum or to treat infertility, especially in parts of Renaissance Italy and Spain. Placenta, being rich in nutrients, was believed to reconnect the body to the forces of rebirth. It's a compelling theory, if you're not the one swallowing it. Then there's the more magical end, candles made of human fat, burned during healing rituals or prayers for the sick. The belief was that their smoke carried both light and vitality from the soul of the deceased. One flickers beside your bed. You feel watched. Even the ashes of a suicide victim's hair were sometimes mixed into potions to absorb dark thoughts. A grim idea, and one we thankfully left behind. But in early psychiatric traditions, sympathetic magic was a major part of the therapeutic approach. You remind yourself never to leave your hairbrush unattended in the past. Back to the gory glamour of royalty. Charles II's royal drops were made of alcohol, crushed pearls, and powdered human skull. He reportedly drank it almost daily, claiming it kept him sharp. He died of kidney disease. You ponder the irony. Of course, all this pales in comparison to the executioner's tea, brewed from herbs stirred with the blade used in a public execution. Said to carry strength, finality, and purification, it was offered to those afflicted by shame, cowardice, or chronic ailments. They bring it to you in a tiny cup. You sip. It's bitter, metallic, a little dramatic, honestly. You lie back again, body coated in the spiritual debris of long-dead strangers, organs tinctured, spirits fortified. A strange peace settles in. Not because you feel better, but because there's probably nothing worse they can do to you now. Still, as morbid as it sounds, you can't help but appreciate the sheer intensity of ancient belief. The conviction that life could be reclaimed from death, that some whisper of vitality lingers in the bones, the blood, the dust. In a world full of suffering and short lifespans, desperate hope had 1,000 flavors. Even if one of them was powdered thigh bone mixed with red wine and goat bile. You lie there, exhausted, body still humming with the echoes of every bizarre, unsettling remedy they've ladled onto your trembling form. But just when you think your time as a medical guinea pig might be up, one final practitioner steps forward. Clad in a velvet robe and clutching a pouch that smells of vinegar and hubris, he grins and announces, "Now for the most sophisticated solution of them all, the enema." Your eyes widen. Your sphincter clenches in protest. The enema, in its endless historical glory, was once seen as a panacea for almost everything. Headaches, fevers, bad dreams, even moral weakness. And the more frequently you received one, the healthier you were believed to be. In fact, some French aristocrats were known to get daily enemas, lounging in bed with silver tubing and scented oils like it was just another morning espresso. Louis XIV reportedly had over 2,000 enemas in his lifetime. You think of his powdered wig and wince. You're eased onto your side. The equipment isn't what you'd call elegant: a pig's bladder, a wooden or metal nozzle, and a whole lot of gravity. The liquid inside. It could be wine, soap, tobacco smoke, or sometimes warm milk infused with herbs. The goal: stimulate the bowels, realign the humors, and purge black bile. You know, that vague ickiness ancient doctors always blamed for everything from gout to gloomy thoughts. And if you're really unlucky, someone offers you a tobacco smoke enema. Yes, they literally blew smoke up people's behinds. With a long brass tube. Over an open flame. This was especially popular along the River Thames in the 18th century to resuscitate drowning victims. The heat and nicotine were believed to jolt the heart and lungs back to life. You quietly wonder if a warm blanket might have worked just as well. Tobacco was the miracle drug of its day. It was smoked, snorted, chewed, brewed, rubbed into wounds, and yes, pumped directly into your colon. You start to understand why snake oil salesmen made a killing. People really were desperate enough to try anything. Not to be outdone, Renaissance physicians also performed nutritive enemas, which involved feeding patients who couldn't eat by inserting warm broths rectally. Chicken soup, beef bouillon, even wine and egg yolks. The digestive tract, after all, is one long tunnel. You imagine a candlelit dinner with your lower intestine. It's not romantic. The tools get fancier. By the 17th century, silver and porcelain enema kits became household staples among Europe's elite. They were engraved with family crests, packed in velvet boxes, and displayed proudly, like a monogrammed espresso machine today. You stare at your own humble bladder tube contraption and feel a little underdressed. And for those who wanted a less invasive approach, enter the therapeutic vomiting crowd. That's right, vomiting as medicine. Once again, it's all about balance. Inducing regurgitation through ipecac root, seawater, or plain old finger-throat action was believed to remove excess phlegm or bile. In 17th century England, you might even hear someone say, "I've had my morning purge, I feel splendid." But of course, everything comes back to the lower end eventually. The Romans had their own twist on enema therapy, using hollow reeds and gravity-powered irrigation. They even built public facilities for it. Imagine the ancient equivalent of a spa day, just with more flushing. You can't ignore the Ayurvedic tradition either, where enemas, called busti, have been used for thousands of years, not just for physical ailments, but for spiritual and energetic realignment. Warm herbal oils and teas, administered with great care and ceremonial grace. You kind of wish that's the version you'd signed up for. Instead, you're handed a thick clay pot filled with something vaguely slimy. A nod to the Mesoamerican practice of using chili pepper infusions rectally, not only for healing, but for ceremonial purification. The burn. Cleansing, apparently. Historians still debate whether this was therapeutic or punitive, or both. In medieval Europe, enema therapy was so widespread it became a punchline in literature. Chaucer even joked about it. But jokes aside, physicians insisted it could cleanse the melancholy, a poetic way of saying, get rid of whatever's making you sad and stinky. Melancholy was associated with depression, confusion, even lust. Naturally, flushing out your colon would fix your love life. Totally logical. As your very modern stomach rebels at this ancient ritual, a final therapist approaches with a scroll. He unrolls it like a waiter presenting the day's specials. Leeches, he offers. Or shall we continue with urine therapy? You blink. He smiles. Yes, urine therapy, another golden idea, he quips, holding up a small vial like it's fine perfume. In ancient India and Renaissance Europe, people drank their own urine, washed wounds with it, and even brushed their teeth with it, believing it to be a universal elixir produced by the body's own filtration system. Modern practitioners still debate its merits, though most mainstream science files it under absolutely not. You ask, very politely, if you can maybe just take a nap instead. The answer, of course, is no. Because it turns out the most disgusting medical treatments in history weren't rare or hidden, they were routine, normal, often lovingly prepared, proudly endorsed, and deeply believed in. That's what makes them so fascinating, and so eerie. People didn't just tolerate these things, they embraced them. You lie still now, a little wiser and a lot more queasy. The room grows quiet. Your body hums with a cocktail of crocodile dung, ground skull, herbal enemas, and centuries of human optimism. Maybe that's the most unsettling part, how hope can turn so easily into horror, and back again. The room fades slowly, like the last flicker of a candle guttering into shadows. The clink of brass and bone fades into silence. You breathe deep now, not of incense or vinegar or plague-blooded steam, but of calm, cool air. The panic ebbs, replaced by the quiet wonder of having survived the strangest of human instincts, the desperate will to heal, no matter the cost. Your limbs sink heavier into the bed. The weight of centuries presses gently against you, not oppressive, but grounding, like the hush of a museum late at night. Even the ghosts of leech sellers and bone powder dealers seem to drift kindly now, content to be remembered, if only in quiet horror. Behind your eyelids, You see glints of oil lamps and dusty jars, the silhouettes of apothecaries and barbers hunched over patients who trusted too much. And yet, there's a strange peace in it. Because for all the filth, the fever, and the fermented frog spawn, there was always hope. That somehow, somewhere, one of these rituals might bring relief. Might restore life. Might work. And now, you get to drift beyond all that, past the clumsy cures and smoky tubes, to a place where nothing aches, nothing smells, and no one is asking you to drink mummy tea. You're safe. You're warm. And even if the past was unspeakably weird, it's behind you now. So close your eyes. Let the fan hum softly. Let your thoughts unravel like old scrolls. And sleep.